Hey guys, tonight we're going to set sail on a myth so soaked in wine, flowers, and vaguely unsettling party energy that even the gods had to step in, and not necessarily with a gentle touch. You're aboard an old wooden ship gliding across a mirror-still sea under a hazy moon. The sails flap lazily. The air smells faintly of salt, pitch, and something sweeter. Grapes, maybe. Or is that just the crew fermenting something below deck? Either way, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Drop it in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to the slow creaking of timbers and the distinct feeling of being on a ship that's not entirely trustworthy. The deck beneath your sandals is sticky, not from sea spray, but something vaguely resinous, sweet, and wine-like, clinging between the planks. Around you, men in tunics and leather sandals shuffle about with little enthusiasm. This isn't a proud Athenian warship or a well-appointed Phoenician trader. This is a tired, unglamorous boat whose best days are behind it and whose current ones involve questionable contracts and lots of muttered curses. A glance at the cargo confirms your suspicions. Amphorae. Dozens of them. All empty. Or at least they're supposed to be empty. But if you lean close enough, you can hear them slosh. Gently, mysteriously, as if someone had bottled a breeze or captured the sound of laughter. You're pretty sure that's not standard issue. The captain, a man with sun-beaten skin and a nose shaped like it once lost a bet with a mast, stomps past you without even a nod. He's chewing on something green and spitting at regular intervals. He doesn't seem to notice the faint purple stains blooming across the deck near the hold. You wander the ship. The sails are patched with mismatched cloth. One has a whole poem stitched into it, badly. The rigging smells like anise, and the ship's cat watches you like it knows you're new here. Historians still argue whether Greek merchant ships had any kind of formal hierarchy beyond who yells the loudest, but this crew seems to operate on a consensus of boredom. One man is whittling a fish hook, another is polishing a conch shell. No one's particularly interested in steering. Where are we going? You ask, maybe too brightly. A nearby sailor squints at you. North, he says, but it sounds like a guess. You try again. What are we hauling? He shrugs. Nothing yet. You ask what port they're heading to, and this time he just pretends the wind is too loud to hear you. The wind is, in fact, not loud at all. Still, there's something oddly peaceful about it all. You settle onto a coil of rope and watch the horizon roll slowly by. Birds wheel overhead, the sea sighs beneath you. Occasionally someone yells about lunch, and another person throws a fish in response. The ship smells like brine, citrus peel, and again, wine. Always wine. According to mainstream historians, ancient Greek sailors often carried amphorae filled with olive oil, wine, or brain. But empty ones usually meant they were heading somewhere to pick up goods. Here, though, the amphorae seem preloaded with anticipation. It's like they're just waiting for something to happen. And something will. You just don't know it yet. At one point, a sailor passes you a cup of watered wine and a bit of flatbread smeared with fish paste. It's surprisingly decent. You thank him and ask his name. He pauses, considers, then says, Salius. You get the feeling that's not quite right, but let it go. As the day draws on, the sun sinks into a lavender haze. The crew begins to mutter more about omens, about strange winds, about the moon rising the wrong way. You look up, and sure enough, the moon has a faint purplish halo, like someone dipped it in grape juice. A fringe fact drifts back to you from somewhere. Something about Dionysus being associated not just with wine and revelry, but also with liminality, that strange in-between state where you're never quite sure if the thing you're seeing is what's actually there. He's a god of the edges, and you're definitely on the edge of something. The ship drifts, the sails barely billow. A gull lands on the prow, caws once, and explodes into a burst of ivy leaves. No one seems to notice. That's when you spot him. A figure on the far end of the deck where no one had been a moment ago. Young, barefoot, with curls that catch the moonlight, and a robe that somehow looks too clean for a place like this. You blink. He smiles. And just like that, you're not sure if you've just spotted a stowaway or something older, something stranger, something that smells faintly of honey and fresh grapes, even in the salt air.
You keep your distance at first. The figure doesn't move. He just leans there, gazing out at the water as if it's reading him bedtime stories. His robe, though simple, hangs in folds too perfect to be the product of normal stitching. Ivy curls around his wrists like living bracelets, though you don't remember any ivy being aboard the ship. And his hair, it's not messy, not quite curly. It's the kind of hair that makes poets forget to eat. No one else seems to notice him. You glance at the nearest sailor. He's too busy trying to unknot a rope that was clearly never knotted. Another is arguing with the cat. The captain is now gnawing on something that might be a turnip and might also just be a particularly ugly seashell. You step toward the figure. The wood creaks beneath your feet, like it's nervous. Hello? You try, voice low, like you're not sure you want a response. The figure glances at you, and for a moment, just a moment, you see something ancient behind the eyes. Not threatening, not unkind, just deep, like he remembers being the breeze itself. He smiles. It's the sort of smile that makes you feel like you've just told a good joke, even though you haven't said anything. Nice boat, he says, without looking around. Thanks, you say, even though it's very obviously not your boat. You don't ask his name. You're not entirely sure why. You lean against the railing nearby, pretending to take in the view. The sea looks flatter than before, like someone ironed it. There's a faint humming in the air, a vibration more felt than heard. It's almost a tune. Bit of a quiet crew, he remarks. Yeah, they don't talk much. He looks at you again. They will. Behind you, a shout, then two. You spin around just in time to see the captain storming down the deck, beard bristling with fury, one hand gesturing wildly toward the figure. Several crew members follow behind, faces pale, but eyes gleaming, not with fear, but with something much worse. Greed. Get him below, the captain growls. We'll make our fortune yet. You freeze. The figure simply exhales. Vines begin curling around the mast. One sailor steps toward him, then hesitates. Another fumbles a rope. The third, Salius maybe, draws a curved blade, but seems reluctant to use it. The figure finally speaks. You don't want to do that. The captain laughs. Oh, I think we do. There's a long, awkward pause, where the wind picks up just enough to flutter the sail like a nervous sigh. Historians still argue whether sailors in ancient myths actually believed in the gods walking among them, or if they just used divine excuses to explain weird things. Either way, this crew seems very willing to risk divine wrath for the chance to sell a pretty stranger at the next port. It's a decision you could generously describe as not their smartest. You take a step back. You're going to sell him? You whisper to one of the sailors. He shrugs. Rich robe, fancy hair. He's clearly from money. You want to ask if the ivy bracelets and magical ambiance suggest anything more, but he's already moved away, tying knots that don't look very secure. The crew starts to surround the figure. You don't move, neither does he. Then the first amphora bursts. It's not loud, more like a slow pop, followed by the glug 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 of something sweet hitting the deck. Wine, thick and dark, running like blood, but smelling like feasts and late summer. Another amphora topples, this one cracking neatly in two. Then a third, then more. The crew freezes, looking from one to the other. The wine doesn't just spread, it snakes. Little rivulets curl between their toes. Some of it climbs uphill, defying gravity. You stare as a tendril of it runs up a sailor's pant leg like a curious snake. The captain yells something incoherently. The figure turns to you and raises an eyebrow, like, "Now do you see?" You nod, slowly. At your feet, you notice a grapevine creeping between the planks, glossy leaves unfolding as if they've always been there. It curls up the railing and stretches toward the sail, which suddenly looks greener than before. The ropes shimmer. The air smells of jasmine. A sailor tries to grab the figure's arm. His hand passes right through it. That sailor screams, not out of pain, there was no impact, but in raw, confused terror. He stumbles back and falls, wine soaking his tunic. His mouth opens again, but instead of a scream, a hiccup comes out. Then a laugh. You turn back to the figure. His eyes now glow just slightly, like the moon's reflection in a dark wine glass. He isn't smiling anymore. Not exactly angry, but definitely done pretending. You wonder if you should say something. Maybe apologize on behalf of the ship? Too late. He moves, finally, and steps lightly across the deck, each footfall blooming with purple flowers and ivy that cracks the wood. The captain tries to draw his sword, but it's already wilted in his hand, now more plant than steel. You stay very still. Another amphora bursts. The cat leaps off the railing and vanishes into the mist, yowling. The figure, yes, Dionysus now, it's obvious, even to you, reaches the mast and places a hand on it. The wood groans, and leaves sprout instantly, curling upward like they've been waiting centuries for this moment. You blink again. The vines are everywhere.
The vines do not creep, they leap, coiling up the rigging, sprouting from the cracks in the deck, unfurling blossoms that puff out little clouds of fragrance like sighs. The air thickens. It smells like a forest on the first truly warm day of spring, when everything is still wet and wild and slightly unpredictable. One of the sailors shrieks, not because he's hurt, but because his leg is suddenly wrapped in ivy, and the ivy appears to be humming. "Hold him!" the captain bellows, his voice cracking like old leather. "Tie him down!" But no one moves. The crew stares, wide-eyed, as the ship shifts under them. The very structure of it seems to breathe. Planks swell, ropes twitch like muscles, the sails billow even without wind. And all the while, the amphorae continue to burst, not violently, but like overripe fruit too full to contain themselves. The wine flows freely now, mingling with leaves and laughter. Yes, laughter. It trickles in at first, soft and distant, then louder, a high, lilting sound somewhere between a giggle and a song. It's not coming from the crew, it's coming from below deck. "Who else is on this ship?" you whisper, but no one answers. You peer down into the hold. The shadows ripple, and then you see them. Figures, not quite human, moving gracefully in the gloom, draped in flowing silks and crowned in ivy, barefoot and dancing. The Maenads, the frenzied followers of Dionysus. They shouldn't be here. They weren't on the ship before. They don't board ships traditionally. But here they are, emerging from the hold in twirls and skips, their laughter floating up like bubbles. One Maenad tosses a cluster of grapes over your head and it lands with a soft plop, already fermented. Mainstream mythology describes the Maenads as women driven to ecstasy by the presence of Dionysus, part worship, part madness. But these ones don't look mad. They look delighted, as if crashing an attempted kidnapping is the highlight of their week. They spread across the deck, dancing through the vines, trailing wine and petals in their wake. A sailor tries to back away and immediately steps on a puddle of wine, slipping and landing in a heap. He stays there, staring at the sky like he's just learned a profound truth about clouds. One Maenad winks at you as she passes. You nod politely. That seems safest. At the center of it all stands Dionysus, no longer boyish, no longer mysterious. Now he is divine, his form shimmering with energy that pulses like a heartbeat. His robe flutters without wind, his hair moves as if underwater. When he lifts his hand, the ship stops moving altogether. Not slowing, not drifting, just stopping, as if the sea itself has agreed to take a breath. The captain finally seems to grasp the gravity of his situation. He drops his weapon, or what's left of it, and stumbles toward Dionysus, hands raised in trembling apology. We didn't know. We thought, just a boy, a runaway, please. Dionysus tilts his head, considering. Historians still argue whether the myth of the Tyrrhenian pirates, those foolish mortals who tried to abduct Dionysus and sell him into slavery, originated as a cautionary tale, a moral fable, or simply one of those don't be an idiot around gods stories that the Greeks were so fond of. Either way, the outcome was never good for the pirates, and you have a front row seat to what happens next. The vines rise higher. The air grows syrupy, cloying with the scent of ferment and flowers. The sails are now completely overgrown, turning from cloth to living canopy. Birds appear, doves and sparrows, flitting among the leaves. The Maenads chant softly, their voices like a lullaby wrapped in moonlight. Then Dionysus speaks. I offered you peace, he says, voice low, echoing, a little like thunder if thunder could giggle. I offered you wine and joy and the sea, but you chose greed. The captain tries to speak, but it's too late. With a single, lazy gesture, Dionysus waves his hand. The transformation begins instantly. It starts at the feet. One sailor cries out as his toes melt into fins. His legs shimmer, elongating, fusing. Scales ripple up his sides, glittering like silver coins in sunlight. His hands become flippers. His mouth stretches. His eyes blink sideways. A dolphin. He's become a dolphin. Another follows, and another. Within moments, the deck is awash with flopping, squeaking shapes as the crew writhes, squeals, and, miraculously, dives overboard one by one. The Maenads laugh and clap as they leap, fins splashing. The sea ripples with silver bodies, sleek and strange. You grip the railing. One of the dolphins, perhaps the captain, circles the ship once, clicks mournfully, and disappears beneath the waves. A mainstream historian might explain this scene as symbolic, a tale about transformation, about punishment, or perhaps about mercy. Dolphins, after all, were considered sacred to Dionysus after this. But the image of pirates becoming playful sea creatures is hard to not interpret with at least a hint of sarcasm. Dionysus watches them vanish, expression unreadable. Then he turns back to you. You stayed quiet, he says. You swallow. Seemed like the smart move. He grins. It was. Behind him, the Maenads are already packing up their celebration. One disappears into the sail. Another vanishes in a swirl of petals. The vines begin to retract, spiraling back into the ship's seams. The air clears slightly, like waking from a vivid dream. The ship shudders, then settles. You glance overboard. The dolphins are gone. Or maybe they're just watching, somewhere below, waiting for the next ship full of poor decisions. Dionysus stretches. Well, that was fun.
You try to speak, but nothing coherent comes out. It's hard to form a sentence when your brain is still buffering. Dionysus doesn't seem to mind. He paces the deck slowly, brushing his fingers along the mast as the last of the vines recede. A final grape drops to the planks with a soft thud, rolls once, and then stays perfectly still, like it knows it played its part. You follow him, warily. So, what now? You finally manage? That depends. Are you planning to throw me overboard too? Nope, you say immediately. I like you. Love the whole, leaf thing. Very tasteful. He chuckles. You know, most mortals try to either worship me or run screaming. You consider this. Maybe I'm too tired to do either. Or maybe, he says, you're starting to understand. What exactly? You're not sure, but your legs carry you forward anyway. The ship drifts now, peacefully, lazily. The kind of drifting that feels intentional, like the sea itself is in on the joke. The sky is smeared with that buttery pink of late afternoon, the kind of hue that painters sigh and give up. The sails flutter gently. There are no more vines, no more wine, no more dolphins leaping overboard in existential panic. Just you and Dionysus, and a faint hum in the air that may or may not be coming from the planks themselves. He walks to the edge of the deck and leans on the railing, gazing out at the waves. You know, before they tried to sell me, I actually liked this crew. They sang well. One of them played a flute. The guy who turned into a dolphin? He nods. He'll still play, just, with clicks now. You look at the water, half expecting a dolphin to surface and start beatboxing. So, were you always a god? I ask, stepping up beside him. He smiles again. Ah, now that's a story. And like that, you're swept backward. Not physically, not violently, just gently, like someone pulling back a curtain. The world around you softens. The ship blurs. The ocean fades. You're no longer standing next to a god on a boat, but drifting in something older, deeper. A vineyard in Thebes. You see it clearly now. Rows of vines stretching over sun-warmed hills, buzzing with bees. A woman, a mortal woman, walking barefoot through the leaves. She's pregnant. She hums to herself. Her name is Semele. She was my mother, a human, loved by a god. You don't need to ask which god. Zeus, of course. Classic Zeus. But Semele, bold and brave, made a mistake. She asked to see Zeus in his full divine form, not his flattering disguise, not his man-about-town look, the real Zeus. And that, Dionysus says softly, was the end of her. Because no mortal can see a god in their true form and live. It's not punishment. It's just too much. Historians still argue whether the myth of Semele's death was meant to warn against ambition, or if it's just a cosmic reminder that dating powerful sky beings rarely ends well. But the story doesn't stop there. As Semele perishes in Zeus's divine radiance, the unborn Dionysus is rescued. plucked from the flames, stitched into Zeus's thigh like a very weird baby carrier. Months later, he's born again, from that thigh. And so, Dionysus becomes the god who is twice born. No one else gets that, he says, almost absently. Death and life, life and death. It explains a lot, you think. The wine, the madness, the joy tinged with sorrow. He's not just a god of grapes and parties. He's a god of transitions, thresholds, the space between. Like dreams, like the moment just before sleep. You blink, and you're back on the ship. The sails flap gently, the horizon glows. Dionysus is still at your side, but somehow older now. Not in appearance, just in weight. Like time itself rests in his pockets. People like to make me a joke. Drunken parties, silly stories, but they forget. Wine isn't just for celebration. It's for grief, for funerals, for forgetting. You nod slowly. The sea stretches out endlessly. There's no land in sight, but you're not afraid. It feels like the ship could sail forever in this twilight, and you wouldn't mind. He sits on a crate, absently playing with a cluster of grapes that seems to have reappeared. You know what the pirates could have done. What? Asked me for wine, for music, for safe passage. I would have given it to them. You tilt your head. Even if they didn't believe in you? Especially if they didn't believe in me. He tosses a grape in the air and catches it in his mouth. Faith is overrated. Curiosity, though, now that's interesting. Another grape tossed higher. This one arcs and lands in a barrel with a soft plunk. You're not like the others. I raise an eyebrow. Because I didn't try to sell you? He grins. Well, yes, but also, you stayed. And you realize in that moment that staying was the real miracle. Not the vines, not the dolphins, not the wine. Just the simple act of witnessing and not running away. A seagull lands on the railing nearby, squawking loudly, then immediately falls asleep. Dionysus points at it. That's how I know you're relaxed. My aura puts birds into REM. You laugh. You don't mean to. It just slips out. He leans back, content. The ship creaks softly beneath you. I could show you more, if you want. You nod. You don't even hesitate. Because you finally realized what's been tugging at you ever since he stepped on the deck. It's not fear. It's not awe. It's the feeling that you're exactly where you're supposed to be.
The ship, now almost entirely silent, sways gently beneath your feet like it's humming along to a tune only Dionysus can hear. The last bits of tension you didn't know you were carrying melt out of your shoulders. Your muscles feel loose, your thoughts syrupy. This isn't normal sailing. This is the kind of motion designed for daydreams and naps. Come, Dionysus says, rising to his feet. Let's take the scenic route. You open your mouth to ask what that means, but the world answers for you. The horizon bends. You blink, rub your eyes, and blink again. But it's real, or real enough. The sun, which moments ago was setting in the west, now arcs impossibly overhead in reverse, as if the sky has decided to rewind itself. Clouds scroll backward. The waves hush. You don't feel dizzy, just relocated. The sea around the ship shimmers and shifts color, turning from the expected Mediterranean blue to something greener, denser.
Land emerges on the starboard side. Forests draped in fog, strange birds in the trees, and the occasional distant echo of a flute. "You've heard of Nysa?" he asks, already knowing the answer. You nod slowly, pretending. Historians still argue whether it was in India, Libya, Thrace, or just somewhere the Greeks made up to sound exotic. But I remember it, because it's where I was raised. The island draws closer. It's lush, verdant, and smells like citrus and old books. You can't see any buildings, just layers of greenery curling over one another like they're shy. Dionysus steps off the ship and directly onto the mist, which somehow supports his weight like moss. You hesitate. He gestures. It won't bite. Tentatively, you follow. The mist feels cool and springy beneath your feet, like walking across chilled pudding. You don't look down. Whatever's below the mist probably doesn't obey the usual laws of physics, and you're not in the mood for vertigo. The island welcomes you with rustling branches and the soft hoot of something nocturnal. Fireflies rise lazily from the underbrush. You half expect to see a centaur loitering near a fern, sipping espresso. This, Dionysus says, arms wide, is where nymphs taught me to dance, where satyrs taught me to drink, and where I first learned the great lesson of all parties. You wait. He waits. You raise an eyebrow. Never, he says with mock gravity, serve goat cheese after honey. You snort. You really were raised by woodland creatures. Of course, they're the best teachers. Wild, unpredictable, and never ask you to finish your vegetables. The path curves. A soft golden light filters through the trees. Ahead, a clearing pulses with life. Vines trained into archways, tables hewn from tree trunks, bowls overflowing with pomegranates and olives and figs. It's a banquet, but no one's hosting. Or maybe the forest itself is. This, Dionysus says, arms wide, is where nymphs taught me to dance, where satyrs taught me to drink, and where I first learned the great lesson of all parties. You wait. He waits. You raise an eyebrow. Never, he says with mock gravity, serve goat cheese after honey. You snort. You really were raised by woodland creatures. Of course, they're the best teachers. Wild, unpredictable, and never ask you to finish your vegetables. The path curves. A soft golden light filters through the trees. Ahead, a clearing pulses with life. Vines trained into archways, tables hewn from tree trunks, bowls overflowing with pomegranates and olives and figs. It's a banquet, but no one's hosting. Or maybe the forest itself is. This, Dionysus says, softer now, is where I learned to be a god. Not in Olympus, not from Zeus, but here, in chaos, in laughter, in the forest that never judged me for being born weird. You pause beside a low-hanging branch. A tiny satyr, no bigger than a cat, peers at you with luminous eyes before scampering off with a twig in its mouth. Most gods, he continues, are born perfect, or powerful, or inevitable. But I was born as a question, twice. You glance at him. He doesn't look sad, just still. You sit at one of the moss-covered tables. The wood creaks a little under you, as if acknowledging your presence. Dionysus takes the seat opposite. He plucks a fig from a bowl, tears it open with a flourish, and hands you half. Try it, he says. I'm told it's better than sleep aids. You take a bite. The fruit is rich, sweet, and somehow fizzy? You can't quite tell. It doesn't taste like anything you've had before. Like dessert invented by someone who never cared about calories or dental work. As you chew, he leans back and gazes upward. They don't tell this part in most versions, the part where I wasn't sure what kind of god I'd be. You swallow. I thought you were the god of wine. And madness, he adds, and joy, and masks, and endings, and beginnings. Depends on who you ask. Seems like a lot to put on one guy. He shrugs. I contain multitudes. Also, I had excellent tutors. The nymphs, old Silenus, even Pan dropped by once and taught me how to tune a reed pipe. You sip from a goblet that you're almost certain wasn't there before. The drink inside is pale pink and tastes like stars would if they were crushable into juice. As you chew, he leans back and gazes upward. The banquet clearing glows softly now. Crickets chirp in rhythm. Somewhere, very far off, you hear the gentle thump of a distant drum. A heartbeat, perhaps, or someone tapping out a lullaby on the edge of reality. You lean back and close your eyes. I could have chosen Olympus, but I liked the forest better. Less ego, more moss. You smile. Why'd you go at all? He doesn't answer right away. When he does, his voice is quieter than usual. Because I had to remind them that joy is sacred too. You sit in silence together, the kind that doesn't need filling. A breeze drifts through, cool and smelling faintly of cedar and crushed thyme. The trees sway, not with wind, but with rhythm, like they're listening to music you can't quite hear. In the trees above, little golden lights begin to blink on. Not fireflies, not lamps, just light. Glowing peacefully like dreams waiting to be caught. You think, this must be what the world looked like before people worried so much about calendars and taxes. The kind of place where you could nap under a fig tree for a week and wake up feeling slightly holier. Dionysus stands, brushing leaves from his robe. Come on, he says, there's more to see. I'm not done turning history into bedtime stories. You stretch your legs, not because they hurt, but because you can't remember the last time you moved. Where to now? He grins. We're going to meet my tutor. He's probably asleep in a barrel. You blink. Silenus? Yep. Big belly, bigger stories. You follow Dionysus back through the trees. The path unwinds like a ribbon in reverse. And just before the clearing disappears behind you, you glance back once, half expecting the whole thing to vanish. It doesn't. It just waits, like it'll still be there if you ever need it again.
You and Dionysus walk in companionable silence, the kind only shared by people who've seen weird things and decided not to overthink them. The mist clears as you exit the forest, revealing a sun-drenched slope that's somehow both afternoon and twilight at the same time. The light is soft and slanted, as though even the sun has agreed to keep its voice down. Ahead is a low stone cottage, circular, squat, and covered in ivy that wiggles slightly when you look at it. It's clearly not just a plant. Greek myths are full of shape-shifting vines, after all. At the base of the cottage's single wooden door sits a barrel, big enough to house a person, and clearly well used. A snore rumbles from within, rich and satisfied, like someone dreaming of an all-you-can-eat buffet and winning. Dionysus smiles. There he is, my mentor, my muse, my occasional babysitter when Zeus forgot I existed. You peer inside the barrel. Sure enough, a large man with a silver beard and a grape-stained tunic lies curled in the most improbable position, snoring into a jug. This is Silenus? You whisper, trying not to wake him. None other, Dionysus nods. God adjacent, mortal adjacent, mostly wine. Silenus stirs with a groan, stretches, and opens one eye, mildly bloodshot, but twinkling with mischief. You bring in guests now, Dio?
Do they know I charge a fee in olives or compliments?
Be nice, Dionysus says. They're listening politely.
Silenus rolls out of the barrel like a walrus trying to join yoga class. He lands with a thud, chuckles, and stands brushing off grape skins from his tunic.
Ah, bedtime traveler, welcome. Sit, sit. I won't tell the same story twice, unless I forget I told it.
You sit on a rock that conveniently shifts to become more comfortable. This place really knows how to host. Silenus picks up a cracked clay cup, pours something that looks suspiciously like melted sunrise into it, and takes a long sip.
So, you want to know why my favorite god turned pirates into dolphins, do you?
You nod. That's the goal. He points a wobbly finger.
Then you need context, kid. Gods don't just turn folks into aquatic mammals without a good story arc. It's about identity, power, and having a flair for drama.
Dionysus lounges nearby, grinning.
Let him talk. He's been rehearsing this one for centuries.
Silenus leans forward, elbows on knees.
Right. So you've got to understand, Dionysus didn't get respect easy. He had to earn it. And like any proper Greek story, that meant getting kidnapped at least once. Historians still argue, Dionysus interjects, whether I was ever truly kidnapped, or if I just wandered into a boat full of bad decisions.
Silenus waves a hand.
Semantics. Point is, once he'd grown up, the world still saw him as the weird wine boy with a crown made of ivy. Not the kind of god who smites or thunders. No temples with columns. Just a party animal with a goat entourage.
You raise an eyebrow.
Goat entourage?
Dionysus raises both hands. I don't pick them, they just follow me.
Silenus continues. So one day, your boy here is chilling on the shores of Icaria, you know, the island where people get sunburnt trying to imitate Icarus. And along come some pirates.
You squint. Wait, why were pirates there?
Silenus chuckles. Why are pirates ever anywhere? Looking for loot, mischief, or someone to kidnap and sell. And let me tell you, they took one look at our lad here, curly hair, fine robe, expensive sandals, and thought jackpot.
They thought I was a prince, Dionysus adds, plucking a grape from thin air and popping it in his mouth, which is technically true, but not the kind of prince you want to ransom, more like the kind that turns your boat into an interactive lesson in hubris.
Silenus snorts. So these pirates, Turanians probably, though the exact ethnic flavor varies by version, haul them onto their ship, laughing and elbowing each other. They tie him up, slap a price on his head, and sail out to sea, already dreaming of what they'll buy with the gold. I didn't say anything, Dionysus murmurs, just waited. And that, Silenus says, dramatically raising his empty cup, was their mistake. He lets the silence stretch, milking the tension. See, pirates know how to fight storms and mutinies, but what they weren't prepared for, he pauses, was ivy. You tilt your head. Ivy? Silenus nods solemnly. The ship started growing it. Not fast. At first, just a vine here, a tendril there, but within minutes, it was everywhere, wrapping the masts, curling around the oars, even braiding itself into the pirates' beards, Dionysus recalls. One guy tried to shave his face with a fish knife. Didn't end well. Silenus chuckles. Then came the wine. Oh, the wine. Barrels split open without warning. Streams of red and white bubbling out of the wood, soaking the decks, filling their boots. The whole ship smelled like a vineyard possessed. And the animals, Dionysus pads. Silenus shudders. Don't remind me. Leopard, lion, maybe a panther or two appeared right there on the ship, out of nothing. You blink. Real animals? As real as Greek myth gets, Dionysus says with a wink. Sharp teeth, glossy fur, lots of growling. Pirates panicked, of course, dropped their swords, screamed, prayed to gods they didn't believe in.
Dionysus folds his arms. They should have picked me. Too late, Selena says. They jumped overboard in terror. Splash, 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 like olives falling into a barrel. And then, Dionysus draws the word out like taffy, I decided I didn't want them to die. Just evolve. You frown. Into dolphins? Yep, he says cheerfully. Graceful, playful, good swimmers. A bit of poetic justice, don't you think? Better than turning into seaweed, Salinas adds, which frankly was also on the table. You glance from one to the other, then back toward the forest path. The story lingers in the air like perfume, earthy, mythic, and just slightly fermented. So, you say slowly, what happened to the ship? Dionysus smiles. It's still out there, somewhere, covered in vines, haunted by the occasional giggle. Salinas yawns and stretches. Anyway, that's the tale. Pirates, gods, grapes, transformation. Classic Tuesday. You stand, brushing imaginary dust off your clothes. Dionysus claps Salinas on the shoulder. Thanks, old friend. Still tell it better than I do. Of course I do, Salinas mutters, curling back into his barrel. I have the better beard. You and Dionysus walk away as the snoring resumes. Ahead, the path opens into a glowing valley. Somewhere below, you catch the scent of honey cakes. We're not done yet, Dionysus says with a grin. Now we visit the oracle.
You follow Dionysus down the slope, your steps soft against the mossy ground that somehow cushions each footfall like a memory foam sandal. The air shifts again, less woodsy now, more charged. A faint, spicy scent curls through it, like cloves left in a warm drawer. Somewhere, a lyre plays itself lazily. You don't ask how. Below lies a stone amphitheater, half swallowed by vines and whispering grasses. It's not the kind of place tourists would find. No signs, no gift shop, just a sloping circle carved into the hillside, facing a cave whose mouth yawns wide and echoing. The kind of place oracles like to hang out, alone, cryptic, and dramatically backlit. This is the oracle, you ask? Well, one of them, Dionysus says. There were dozens, you know. Everyone remembers Delphi, but oracles popped up like mushrooms after rain. This one specializes in minor fates, pirate futures, goat politics, that sort of thing. You blink. Goat politics? He shrugs. You wouldn't believe how competitive their elections are. You descend toward the cave, its walls carved with spirals and strange glyphs that may or may not be ancient to-do lists. At the entrance stands a woman cloaked in layers of smoke-colored linen, her eyes closed, her feet bare, her whole vibe hovering somewhere between yoga instructor and eldritch librarian. She doesn't open her eyes, just speaks. You have come to know why the sea remembers. You hesitate. Sure, let's go with that. The oracle opens one eye, peers at you, and then nods like she's reading a very slow-moving scroll. You walk in stories, not your own, but you carry their dust. You glance at Dionysus, who offers nothing but a theatrical shrug. He gets like this, he murmurs. Let her warm up. The oracle breathes in deeply, then finally points toward the amphitheater center. Sit. The myths will find you. You do. The stone seat is surprisingly warm, heated perhaps by residual prophecy. Dionysus lounges beside you, hands behind his head, clearly having a great time. The oracle begins to chant, not loudly, but rhythmically. Words unspool from her lips in Old Greek, then Middle Greek, then something that sounds suspiciously like interpretive humming. Smoke curls up from her sleeves. Her hair moves as though underwater. And then, your vision flickers. You're no longer in the amphitheater.
You're on the sea again, not with Dionysus this time, but in the mind of a pirate. A young one, not yet tattooed, not yet hardened. Let's call him Phalos. Phalos is rowing. The sail has failed again, so he rows while the others curse and trade complaints about dinner. He's not particularly cruel, this pirate. He just got roped in during a bad season and never left. His mother wanted him to be a potter. You feel the ache in his arms, the salt on his lips. Then, you see Dionysus standing on the beach, dressed like a minor prince, alone. Easy target, someone mutters. The captain gives the order. They row toward the shore. You, Phalos, try to voice a protest. It feels wrong somehow, but it dies in your throat like a bubble. Back on the ship, ropes are tossed. Dionysus doesn't resist. He smiles like someone watching a seagull try to steal a sandwich. Phalos avoids eye contact. It feels like tying up a statue, or maybe a very well-behaved peacock. Then, the ship shifts. First, it's the creaking. The planks complain like old bones. Then, the vines. At first, Phalos thinks they're hallucinations. Sea madness, maybe. But they grow, tangibly, rapidly, with little leafy sighs. The mast becomes a green column. The sail becomes petals. The tiller sprouts roses. Someone screams. It's not Phalos. And then come the animals. They don't growl, they purr. That's worse. Phalos drops his oar. He kneels. He whispers, "Who are you?" And Dionysus smiles, gently, not mockingly. A reminder. Then everything fades, not just the vision. Your whole sense of being washes away like ink in the tide. Back in the amphitheater, the oracle sighs and finally opens both eyes. Even now, dolphins circle that part of the sea. They remember. They always remember. Dionysus rises and stretches like someone who just napped through a really intense dream. "She's good, huh?" You nod. "But you didn't come here just for that," the oracle adds, a little mischievously. "You came to understand why he turned pirates into dolphins." You blink. "That's what we've been doing, right?" "No. You've seen the how. The why still waits." Dionysus leans over. "Told you it wasn't that simple." The oracle tilts her head. "You must walk the labyrinth." Oh no, there's a labyrinth. There's always a labyrinth. But don't worry, this one has snacks. The oracle hands you a fig wrapped in a fig leaf. You'll need this. You turn it over. It's warm, sweet-smelling, possibly prophetic. As you bite into it, the cave behind her shifts. The stone folds away like soft parchment, revealing a spiraling descent of glimmering steps. They echo with a strange glassy tone, like someone humming through a wine glass. You look back at Dionysus. He offers you a hand. "Shall we?" Do I have a choice? Technically, yes, but if you turn back now, you'll never know what the dolphins really mean. And just like that, you're walking downward again, deeper into the myth, not to understand a punishment, but a transformation. One that, if the oracle is to be believed, hasn't finished happening yet.
The steps spiral down like the inside of a conch shell, tight, echoing, endless. The fig lingers sweet on your tongue, oddly energizing for something handed to you by a barefoot oracle who smells like library incense and lightning storms. You walk for what feels like hours, your footsteps soft against glassy stone that gives slightly underfoot, like it's remembering everyone who's walked here before. Dionysus strolls beside you with infuriating ease. He's humming again, something vaguely jazzy, which is a surprise. This labyrinth isn't about getting lost, he explains. It's about being found, or unfound, depending on your vibe. You frown, and it leads to, he grins, to the deeper whine of it all. That clears nothing up, but you're already too far in to argue. Around a bend, the walls begin to glow faintly. No torches, just the stone itself, etched with scenes that shimmer like warm breath on a cold mirror. You pause at one. It shows a boat mid-transformation, planks peeling into bark, oars flowering into vines, pirates halfway between men and slick, laughing dolphins. You ask the obvious, why dolphins? Dionysus stops, looks genuinely contemplative for a moment. They were sailors. They knew the sea. It wasn't a punishment, really, more of a recalibration. You raise an eyebrow. Turning someone into a dolphin seems pretty punishing. He shrugs. Depends what they were turning into already. I gave them a course correction, and now they sing in the tides. You walk again. Another panel glows to life. This one showing a boy with curly hair and a cluster of grapes standing beside a lion and a panther, both sitting calmly like they're waiting to be fed peeled dates. That's you, you say. Most of the time, he replies. A soft rumble echoes down the corridor. It's not threatening, just deep and far away, like someone moving furniture underwater. Others came before you, Dionysus adds. Historians, poets, even an accountant once. Most of them got distracted by the walls and never made it to the center. You glance at the images still shifting along the glowing panels. In one, Dionysus rides a cart pulled by leopards wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat and sipping from a chalice. In another, he's cradling a wine jug like a baby. There's one where he's wrestling a tree. Is all this true? He says. Truth is flexible, but here's a real one for you. Wine was once stored in goat skins, and the best amphoras had little clay stoppers shaped like gods. You stare. That's the historical fact you're dropping on me right now? He grins. Never underestimate the importance of goat-based beverage containers. Civilization owes more to fermented liquids than people want to admit. You laugh, gently, tiredly. It echoes strangely, as if the labyrinth is saving your amusement for later. And then, the tunnel widens. You step into a vast chamber, lit from above by a ceiling that looks like the inside of a geode. Shimmering purples and deep blues pulse gently overhead. A circular pool lies in the center of the room, still and perfectly reflective. Around it, marble benches shaped like reclining nymphs cradle bowls of fruit and tiny golden amphoras. Welcome, Dionysus says, to the mirror. You approach the pool. Your reflection is there. Blurry at first, then sharper, then not quite you. It shifts. For a moment, you see yourself as Thalos, a pirate, then as the fig-carrying listener, then as a dolphin. Not a cartoonish one, just sleek, intelligent, and oddly familiar. You step back. This isn't just a story, you ask. It no story ever is, Dionysus replies, watching the surface of the pool with the quiet reverence of someone who's seen a lot of different faces in it. I sit on one of the marble benches. It's warmer than I expect, smooth as polished driftwood. Let me guess, you say. Historians still argue whether this is symbolic. They do, he nods. Some think the dolphin thing was a coded warning. Others say it was borrowed from Phoenician lore. Those sea-loving folks loved a good animal transformation. And a few even argue I didn't exist at all. You stare at him. He winks. Let's not tell them I'm here. He tosses you one of the tiny golden amphoras. It's heavier than it looks.
When you uncork it, the scent of honeyed wine and something herbal, maybe thyme or myrrh, rises up and makes your eyelids droop for a moment. You sip. It tastes like memories. Back in the day, he says, swirling his own amphora lazily, we used wine not just for partying, but for seeing, divination, healing, grief. It was the door and the escape hatch. You nod. The labyrinth, the transformations, the pirates, it's all settling now, softening at the edges. They weren't punished for being pirates. They were transformed because they refused to see what they'd become. Sometimes that's the only way forward. You can't fight the tide, but you can swim with it. You look again into the mirror pool. Your reflection has returned to normal now. Your eyes a little heavier, your shoulders relaxed. There's a dolphin fin in the corner of the water, flickering like a dream about to fade. How much deeper does the labyrinth go? You ask. He tilts his head. As far as you're willing to follow your own myths. You lie back on the nymph-shaped bench, surprisingly comfortable. The geode ceiling pulses slowly above you, like a heartbeat slowed down for sleep. And Dionysus leans against the wall, arms folded, eyes half closed. You're doing better than the accountant, he murmurs.
The sermon doesn't end. It only unfolds. Slowly. Like molasses in January, or the tail of a cat reluctantly descending from a table it was never allowed on in the first place. You've given up tracking which part of the Bible you're in now. Could be Lamentations, could be Leviticus, could be a deeply theological meditation on why buttons are secretly prideful. Hard to say. The only constant is this: your body wants a nap, and everyone around you is trying to stop you from getting one. The term Sabbath comes from the Hebrew word Shabbat, which means to rest. But let's be clear. Colonial New Englanders interpreted rest as cease all activity that could in any way be described as fun or relaxing. Sleeping during the Sabbath, especially in church, was seen as a direct affront to God. Not because sleep was inherently bad, everyone needed it, but because falling asleep while hearing the word suggested you weren't spiritually awake, and that was a big no-no. You shift in your seat. The woman with the elaborate lace cap in front of you hasn't moved in 10 minutes. You can't tell if she's deep in reflection or just very, very asleep. Either way, no one's poked her yet, which means she's passing the unofficial Sunday nap inspection. Historians still argue whether the anti-nap obsession was purely religious or if it had more to do with social pressure to demonstrate upright piety. After all, a sleepy congregation doesn't exactly scream "city on a hill." And nothing makes a minister feel less appreciated than seeing his flock quietly dozing like sheep in pews. So the Sabbath wasn't just a break from work, it was a kind of all-day performance. Imagine if your weekly break from your exhausting job was an even more exhausting job, but one where everyone watched you do it and judged your posture. You try to focus again. The minister is describing the sins of King Saul with the slow-burning energy of someone explaining a corn recipe while underwater. He has not blinked in 2 minutes. Someone in the back sneezes and is immediately offered a clean linen handkerchief and a warning glance. The tithing man perks up like a watchdog. Now, this tithing man, let's talk about him. He's not clergy, he's not elected. He's not particularly popular. He's appointed, sometimes reluctantly, to enforce morality during Sunday services. His tools? A long stick with 2 ends, one soft and one not. The soft end, usually adorned with a fox tail or a tuft of feathers, was for gently tickling women or elderly men awake. The other end, often just a knob of hard wood, was for giving a brisk tap to any dozing menfolk, especially younger ones. Equality? Not quite. You watch him move now, the wooden staff swaying like a conductor's baton in slow motion. He's very good at looking busy.
He scans the pews like a sleepy hawk, nodding occasionally, raising an eyebrow at a boy picking at a loose knot in the floorboard. If someone yawns too widely, he might side over, not to jab, not just yet, but to loom. Tithing men specialize in looming. The oddest part? This isn't just a local oddity. Across the colonies, especially in Puritan regions like Massachusetts and Connecticut, staying awake on the Sabbath was taken very seriously. Some churches had men stationed on upper balconies, looking down at the heads below, tracking movement like snipers of sloth. You blink and suddenly realize you've been staring at the same knot in the wall for what feels like 20 minutes. That knot, you are convinced, looks just like a potato with a mustache. You're not sure why that's funny, but it is. Very funny. Dangerous. You bite your lip, stifling a smile. A smile could be interpreted as disrespect, or worse, enjoyment. Next to you, a girl who looks no older than 13 is holding a sprig of something under her nose. Lavender maybe, or rosemary. Colonial folks sometimes brought herbs to sniff during long sermons to stay alert. A little pocket of scent in a world of wool, wax, and sleepiness. And still, the sermon rolls on. The logic at the time went something like this. God gave you 6 days to labor and 1 day to glorify Him. That meant not only avoiding manual work, but also abstaining from idleness. Napping, that was idle. And if you're idle, you might as well be out carousing or, heaven forbid, dancing. One town in Massachusetts even passed a bylaw specifically stating that anyone found abusing the Lord's day by idleness, unlawful gaming, or sleep in the time of worship would be subject to fines or public reprimand. You imagine a sleepy teenager being led before the town selectmen for the crime of drooping eyelids. Historians still debate how strictly these laws were enforced versus how much they were just about keeping up appearances. It's likely that most people napped discreetly and were only reprimanded if they snored, drooled, or toppled off the pew entirely. Still, the cultural message was clear. Staying awake in church was a matter of spiritual discipline. The mind must conquer the flesh. The spirit must be vigilant. The body must sit through a 5-hour sermon on covenant theology without falling asleep on its neighbor's shoulder. Easier said than done. You start to notice patterns now. People adjust their posture precisely every 20 minutes. Someone coughs, and it triggers a chain of polite, deliberately quiet throat clearings. The tithing man circles like a bored mall cop. Even the minister has paused for a full breath, a moment of mercy. A ripple of almost relaxation passes through the pews. Then he begins again, louder this time. I wonder if he saw someone blink too slowly. And so you sink back into the moment. The scratch of linen, the scent of candle smoke, the soft crunch of someone chewing a pine needle, an old trick to stay alert, though probably terrible for your teeth. The day stretches endlessly ahead, a tapestry of theology, vigilance, and the ever-present danger of a well-timed poke to the ribs.
The sound of the fountain fades behind you, replaced by something softer, a rhythmic lapping like waves against a quiet dock. You follow Dionysus through an archway shaped like a whale's open mouth. Classy. You step out onto what looks like a wooden pier, but there's no water, just a vast, shifting floor of mist. The boards creak underfoot, and for a moment you wonder if this is another metaphor. The god notices your hesitation. Don't worry, he says, balancing on the edge like a circus acrobat. This is the part where the story loosens its belt and lets out a sigh. You walk with him. There's no wind, but the mist moves on its own, parting around your ankles like it knows who you are. This is the place where myths drift, Dionysus says. The versions that got left behind, the stories that didn't quite fit the narrative. They end up here. Tidal lore. You spot something bobbing nearby. an oar, but carved with symbols that don't match any script you recognize. Another object floats past, a cracked amphora with a face painted on the side. It's not smiling. These are bits of myths that never made the final edit, you ask. He nods. Some scrolls were lost in fires, others were never written down at all, and some were just too strange to explain at symposiums. One drifts close enough for you to grab, a scroll sealed with wax in the shape of a fish. You crack it open and scan the delicate script. It tells a version of the dolphin myth where the pirates aren't pirates at all, but actors who stole Dionysus's costume trunk during a traveling festival. In this telling, their ship wasn't a trading vessel. It was a floating stage. When they mocked the god by performing a parody of his own rites, he turned them into dolphins mid-scene. You show Dionysus. He shrugs. I did say I was a theater kid. So which version is true, you ask? He grins. That's the wrong question. The better one is which version sings the loudest when you're falling asleep. The pier stretches on. Lamps appear now, flickering gently like fireflies in glass. Each one you pass lights a little more of the mist, revealing outlines of ships that never sailed, temples built only in dreams, and people with names no one remembers. Want another tidbit? Dionysus offers. Some Roman historians tried to claim I wasn't Greek at all, that I came from Thrace or even India. Did you? I came from everywhere wine was poured and someone danced barefoot in dirt. The labels didn't matter to me. You spot another drifting object, a child's sandal, impossibly small, decorated with grapes. Even kids had myths? Oh yes, they had versions of my stories with soft endings, no transformations, just parties and naps. That sounds ideal, right? You'd be surprised how often children's myths hold the core of a culture. Adults complicate things. Kids go straight to what matters. You keep walking. The mist parts farther, and now there's a boat waiting at the end of the dock. A sleek vessel, shaped more like a seashell than a proper ship, and painted in moonlight. Dionysus gestures. This will take us through the memory sea. You step aboard. It doesn't rock or shift. It simply accepts you. He climbs in beside you, lounges across one of the low benches, and pulls a rope that sounds like a harp string when it moves. The mist recedes. Water appears, but it's not the normal blue of oceans. It's silver, rippling like mercury with flecks of gold and lavender. As the boat glides forward, he continues casually. Historians still argue whether I was ever truly a god or just a metaphor for ecstatic states. You glance at him. You seem pretty godlike. I've worked hard on the brand, he says with a wink, but some say I represent the human need to dissolve boundaries between self and other, between the divine and the mundane. You tilt your head. Between pirates and dolphins. Exactly. The silver water murmurs beneath the boat. You lie back, watching the clouds drift overhead. Clouds that occasionally flicker into scenes from other myths. A woman riding a lion, crowned in ivy. A boy turning into a grapevine mid-laugh. A man floating over a battlefield, spilling wine instead of blood. You say, these feel like dreams. They are. Old ones. The kind that linger after you wake up. You close your eyes for a moment. The boat rocks gently now, like it remembered how to behave. There's music in the distance, pipes, faint and cheerful, maybe played by invisible satars just beyond the mist. Did you ever regret it, you ask, eyes still shut? Turning them into dolphins? Dionysus is quiet for a moment. Then he answers softly. No, they were already drifting too far from their story. I just helped them find a better ending. You sit up slowly. But endings are sad. Not always, he says. Some are just a change in shape. You sail on, passing through a ring of stone columns rising from the water like the ribs of an ancient leviathan. One has a vine creeping up it, blooming despite the salt air. Another hosts a single seagull that watches you like it knows things. Fun fact, Dionysus offers, some scholars believe the dolphin story was part of a larger seasonal myth, death and rebirth tied to the grape harvest. Pirates become dolphins, wine becomes vinegar, then becomes wine again. You nod. It's all cycles. Exactly. And sleep is just another one. The boat glides to a stop at another pier. This one's made of coral and driftwood, humming softly with some unseen current. Dionysus stands and offers you a hand. This part's a little surreal, just go with it. You step out, and the ground beneath your feet feels like walking on polished sand and memory foam. The path leads upward toward what looks like a cave carved into the side of a hill made of soft clouds. We're going to the amphitheater. You blink. The what now? Where the myths play themselves out again and again. But this time, you're in the audience. I sigh contentedly. At least I don't have to act. Not unless you want to be a dolphin. We both laugh, and the cave ahead glows softly, welcoming, like the hush just before a bedtime story begins again.
You step into the cave, and it's unlike any theater you've ever seen. Less of a place and more of a sensation, like walking into the inside of a memory that's been lovingly dusted off for your comfort. The walls are soft stone, veined with glowing minerals and shades of lavender and honey. The air smells faintly of fig leaves and something toasted. Maybe almonds? The amphitheater isn't grand. It's small, intimate, like the kind of stage set up in a vineyard clearing or behind a village inn. Mossy steps rise around a crescent-shaped stage, and the seats are cushioned with furs and faded tapestries. You can already hear voices, low and murmuring, like a sleepy audience waiting for the lights to dim. Dionysus gestures for you to sit near the front. You'll want a good view for this part, he says, reclining on a pillow that appears the moment he waves his hand. The actors have been practicing for a few thousand years, give or take. You sit. The cushion gives in exactly the right way, supportive yet indulgently lazy. The murmuring fades as soft lights glow along the stage's edge. A mist rolls across the platform. Then, without fanfare, the play begins. No curtain, no announcement. Just an old wooden ship, wobbly, painted with wine-red sails, emerging through the mist, crewed by actors with exaggerated gestures and delightfully uneven beards. They swagger about, clearly meant to be the pirates, though they look more like your neighborhood theater group after one too many pitchers of sangria. Are these the originals? You whisper. Dionysus chuckles. No, but close. These actors are myths about myths, each one a memory of how someone remembered the story. You're watching the collective dream of the tale. The pirates argue in a mixture of ancient Greek and interpretive dance. One climbs the mast, only to tumble dramatically into a net. Another waves a wine jug around, pretending to drink before spilling it theatrically and weeping into a sleeve. They really committed to the bit, you say. It's called pathos, Dionysus says, mock serious. A figure appears at the edge of the stage now, tall, robed, and barefoot, with a wreath of ivy around his head. His movements are too fluid for a mortal actor. When he speaks, his voice echoes with 100 amphorae clinking. I am the one you invited without meaning to. I have brought the vine and the truth. You glance at Dionysus. That's you, isn't it? Flattering, but no. That's one version of me. Older, more theatrical. The version you'd find painted on the side of a crater. The scene shifts. The pirates laugh at the robed figure, mimicking his walk, his tone, even the way he sips wine. One pirate drops a bunch of grapes and crushes them underfoot. The audience gasps, not because of the violence, but because wasting grapes is practically a crime here. Lightning flashes, not real lightning, but a painted backdrop, unfurling rapidly with flashing gold foil and theatrical thunder. The wine on stage begins to bubble. The sails turn into vines. The mast sprouts leaves. One pirate starts hiccuping flower petals. It's a bit dramatic, you say. That's theater, Dionysus replies. It's supposed to be bigger than life. Myths are how we exaggerate the truth until it feels like honesty.
On stage, the pirates panic. They try to row, but their oars turn into fish. They try to jump, but the water lifts to meet them in shimmering curtains. And then, just as the music swells to a flourish, poof! The actors drop to all fours and begin twirling and flipping like dolphins. A child in the audience claps. Dionysus waves her. She's part of a dream someone had in 600 BCE, he tells you. You sit back, absorbing it. So every time someone imagines the story, it adds another layer? Exactly. Every retelling is a coat of paint. Some crackle, some shine. But all of them stick around. The stage goes quiet. A new scene begins, this one a quiet beach. A single dolphin lies on the sand, then slowly becomes a man again. His eyes are wide, frightened. He crawls to a fishing village and is met with stares, then cautious kindness. I haven't seen this version, you whisper. It's one of the forgotten ones, Dionysus murmurs. A folk tale passed down by islanders who believed dolphins could become men again if they remembered how to cry. That's strangely sweet. It's strangely everything. The actors bow. The audience, somewhere between real and not, offers gentle applause. Someone throws laurel leaves. The dolphins on stage flick their imaginary tails in appreciation. Dionysus stands. Come on, there's one more stop before we start winding down. You follow him out of the amphitheater, stepping through a curtain of rain that doesn't wet you, just refreshes, like walking through a memory of weather. The path beyond leads to a garden blooming under moonlight. The plants are strange, grapevines with silver leaves, fig trees whose fruit hums softly, and low-growing herbs that smell like crushed myth and incense. Dionysus brushes past a bush with star-shaped berries. He says, "This garden grows plants from lost rituals, dreams of what might have been sacred." You pause by a vine wrapped around a broken column. Historians still argue about your rites, you say. Some say they were solemn, others that they were wild and ecstatic. He nods. They were both. Like all good things, they held contradiction. You wander the garden quietly. The air here is slower, thoughtful. You start to feel the story settling into your bones like a blanket tucked in by time. Ever wonder why I'm called Twice Born? Asks Dionysus. Because of the whole thigh thing? You offer, referring to the myth where Zeus stitched him into his leg to save him. Partly, but also because every story I'm in has a second life. One in the telling and one in the remembering. You sit on a mossy stone. So what happens to the stories that stop being told? He looks around the garden. They don't die. They grow quiet. They wait. The vines rustle softly in agreement.
You lean back on the mossy stone, listening to the soft rustling of vines overhead. Dionysus crouches beside a shallow pool that reflects the moon and nothing else. Not your face, not the trees, not even him. Just the moon, bright and alone. He dips a finger in the water and ripples spread out like lazy thoughts. Now, he says, you've seen the myth told as theater, but how about the way it lives? The way it slips into art, into gossip, into pottery and perfume, and stray lines of poetry. You peer into the pool. At first, it's just more of that silver moon, but then the water shifts, and suddenly you're staring into a different world. A sunlit Greek workshop, dusty with crushed seashells and ochre pigment. Inside, a teenage boy squints over a clay pot. He's painting what looks suspiciously like a dolphin wearing a toga. Okay, you whisper, not exactly museum-worthy. His name's Mythological. He worked in Corinth, got teased mercilessly for putting dolphins in everything. But 300 years later, someone found one of his shards and built an entire lecture series around it. You watch as Mythological gently presses his thumb into a wet coil of clay, smoothing the base of the vase. In the background, an older potter argues with someone over whether dolphins are good luck or just fish that don't know how to quit. There's debate over whether dolphins were sacred to me or just happened to show up a lot. Dionysus grins. Historians still argue whether they were protectors of sailors or reminders of divine punishment. The scene ripples again, shifting. Now you're in a villa garden during the Roman Empire. A mural sprawls across one wall, Dionysus reclining on a crater, surrounded by dolphins playing flutes. A house slave dusts the fresco with a horsehair brush, humming something that sounds like a lullaby. I didn't authorize this one, Dionysus mutters, but I do look excellent. Why do they always paint you lounging? Don't you ever stand? He winks. Relaxation is a form of power. Back in the villa, two guests stroll by, wine cups in hand. One points at the mural. I heard the dolphins used to be men, turned into animals for mocking a god. The other laughs. Or they rescued someone important. Depends who you ask. The pool darkens, swirls, then clears again. This time, you're on a Byzantine ship late at night. A sailor kneels beside a low lantern, whispering something into the sea. It takes you a moment to realize he's praying. Keep the dolphins close, Lord of Wine. Keep them laughing. Dionysus nods solemnly. Long after the temples closed, sailors kept whispering to the water. It's funny how some stories lose their statues, but keep their prayers. You watch as the ship rocks gently, the water dark and vast, but peaceful. Somewhere nearby, a splash breaks the stillness, then another. Dolphins, pale under the moon, racing alongside the boat. Your eyes return to the sailor, now smiling softly, as if reassured. Then the pool ripples once more. Now you're centuries later, in a Florentine library. A scholar flips through a manuscript while sipping something entirely too strong for that hour of the morning. On the parchment, someone has scribbled a half-translated version of a Dionysian myth, but instead of pirates, it's Venetian traders, and instead of dolphins, the punishment is being turned into cats. That version didn't catch on, Dionysus says, sipping from a fig-shaped flask. Too many cat lovers. Still, you say, the shape of the story stayed the same. Exactly, he replies. The lesson is flexible. The frame is eternal. Defy the divine guest, and transformation follows. The scene shifts once more. Now you're in a Victorian drawing room. A child sits on the floor, reading a mythology book aloud to a sleeping spaniel. The illustrations are dainty. One shows Dionysus in a very modest toga, scolding some bewildered pirates as dolphins leap dramatically in the background. The child giggles. It says here the pirates were rude because they didn't believe in gods, and Dionysus told them off without yelling. He just turned them into something better. Kind of poetic, you say. Poetic, Dionysus agrees, and strangely optimistic. Even punishments in my myths tend to be creative rather than cruel. You pause, then look at him sideways. But dolphins, was it mercy, mockery, or something in between? He shrugs. Maybe all three. Maybe I saw a bunch of loud, sweaty men and thought, you'd be happier with fins. He grins. I do have a soft spot for transformation. The pool settles again, now reflecting only your own tired face, dim, stretched by the low moonlight, softened by the journey. You realize something. This story isn't just old. It's been lived in, retold, redrawn, repurposed, and at every step, it gains something. Color, humor, longing. You lean back on your mossy perch. So, what's the point, then? Why does this one story survive when others don't? Dionysus stands, brushing imaginary dust off his robe. Maybe because it's got everything. Wine, mischief, redemption, boats. Maybe because it lets people dream of second chances. Or maybe it's just really fun to imagine pirates squeaking. You laugh. The sound echoes gently through the vine-wrapped garden, and a nearby fig tree seems to rustle in approval. "Come on," he says, offering a hand. "One last thing." You take it. The path ahead glows faintly, like a trail of starlight filtered through wine. You follow it without hesitation.
The path tightens into a narrow corridor of grapevines, their tendrils brushing your shoulders like sleepy hands guiding you forward. The scent of crushed leaves and damp earth follows every step. You feel the ground softening underfoot, turning from stone to loam, and then to something else entirely, more like a floor made of soundless lullabies. Dionysus doesn't speak. He simply walks ahead, hands tucked behind his back, whistling a melody that no one remembers writing, but everyone somehow knows. At the end of the path, the corridor opens into a clearing, a gentle bowl carved into the hillside, full of starlight and old statues. You pause at the threshold. The statues are odd. They don't sit on plinths or stand tall like the ones in grand museums. Instead, they lounge, recline, sprawl across picnic blankets and baskets as if halfway through an eternal afternoon. One is mid-sip from a stone cup, another mid-laugh. A few have been overtaken by moss or ivy. One has a sparrow nesting in its open palm. "What is this place?" you whisper. Dionysus turns to you, arms wide. This is the last chorus. Every story ends with someone watching. These statues are the silent witnesses. You step closer. The carvings aren't all Greek. You spot Roman hairstyles, Egyptian necklaces, even what looks like a faintly Mesoamerican headdress. There's a woman with dreadlocks strumming a lyre carved from obsidian, and beside her, a child clutching a scroll covered in stars. They're all myth makers, Dionysus says, tellers and listeners. Every culture has them. These are the ones who dreamed of me, even if they didn't know my name. One statue catches your eye, a pirate mid-transformation. His face is caught between surprise and delight, his legs already shaped into a sleek dolphin's tail. A single carved drop of stone water rests on his cheek. Was he scared, you ask? Dionysus sits beside the statue and taps the dolphin's tail. Probably, but some of them weren't. Some embraced it, the chance to be something other than themselves. You study the pirate's face. There's no agony there, just awe, like someone waking up from a long nap and realizing they've turned into music. But why dolphins, though? Why not birds or clouds or, I don't know, wine bottles? Dionysus chuckles. Dolphins are liminal. They dance between worlds, sea and air, joy and survival. They're smart enough to joke and wild enough to vanish. Turning someone into a dolphin is like saying, you're not being erased, you're being rewritten. You wander among the statues now, pausing by each as if they might speak. Some of them seem to smile. One is holding a mask, its features identical to your own. You blink, then blink again. The mask's expression shifts just slightly into mischief. You turn to Dionysus. This whole journey, was it just a play? Would that be so bad? Plays are honest in their own way. They let you say impossible things out loud. You walk to the center of the clearing and look up. The sky above is layered, like curtains pulled back just slightly, revealing not one starry night, but dozens. Painted skies, embroidered galaxies, sketched moons. Somewhere in those layers, your own night sky is watching, waiting for you to return. Dionysus joins you. You know, he says, there's a version of this story where the pirates become dolphins and then rescue a drowning poet. They swim him to shore, then vanish before he can say thank you. That one sounds nice, you murmur. It is, but then there's another version where the dolphins just play forever. No lessons, just joy. You tilt your head. So, is the story supposed to teach something? Only what you want it to, he says. Some people see punishment, some see salvation. Others just like imagining dolphins flipping through waves, laughing in a language we forgot how to speak. The statues begin to fade into shadows, the starlight dimming around them. You feel it, the story winding itself into a knot, not to be undone, but to be placed gently on a shelf. The kind of ending that doesn't slam a door, but simply walks you to it. You turn to Dionysus. So this is it? For now, he says. But stories don't really end. They nap. They wait for someone to say, "Hey, remember that weird myth about the wine god and the pirates?" He waves his hand, and the path behind you unfurls again, brighter than before. You take a step, then another. Before you go, you glance back. The pirate dolphin statue raises a stone eyebrow at you, just barely. "Good night," you whisper. The garden answers with a breeze that smells like crushed thyme and salt. And then you walk on.
You step carefully down the path, though your feet barely make a sound now. It's as if even the ground knows it's time to wind down. The world around you feels lighter, not empty, just simplified. Like the outlines of a dream you'll still half remember in the morning. The grapevines arch overhead again, a leafy tunnel of soft shadow and hushed memory. You think about the pirates, once brash, defiant, and foolish, now reborn as sleek, playful swimmers. You can almost hear them chirping to each other beneath the waves, trading jokes and sonar. Dionysus walks beside you again, trailing his fingers along the vines. "The best stories," he says, "aren't told. They're soaked into you, like wine into cloth. You wake up the next day and realize, oh, that story's changed me." You glance at him. Even if it's just about pirates getting a divine prank? "Especially those," he replies with a wink. "Mischief is medicine, and transformation isn't always a warning, it's a gift with a twist." He plucks a grape and offers it to you. You pop it into your mouth without thinking. It's absurdly sweet, a little ridiculous, honestly. You both laugh. You come upon another small shrine now, this one much simpler. Just a rough stone bench and a carved dolphin tail half buried in the grass. A few offerings light its base, a wilted flower, a crust of bread, a tiny flute carved from olive wood. "People still leave things here?" you ask. "Sometimes," Dionysus says. "Usually when they've heard the story, but can't quite figure out what it means. They come here looking for the punchline." Do they find it? He shrugs, not usually, but they leave lighter. That's enough. You sit on the stone bench and watch the wind tilt through the leaves. There's something calming about the lack of urgency. No one's waiting, nothing is ending. You're just here with a god who turns pirates into sea mammals and a myth that wears too many faces to count. He sits beside you, not saying anything for a long while. You finally break the silence. What would you have done if they hadn't kidnapped you? If the pirates just said, "Hey, welcome aboard. Want some fruit?" He tilts his head, as if considering that for the first time in millennia. Huh. Probably danced. Maybe left them a gift. I don't need adoration. I need openness. Is that why you're always testing people? It's not a test. It's a mirror. People show themselves in how they treat strangers. You nod. The dolphins make more sense now. Not just punishment,
but reflection. A reminder that who you are when no one's watching might just decide what you become. Dionysus rises again, brushing grass from his robes. "This is one more stop," he says. You follow him into a grove ringed by ancient trees. In the center stands a single weathered amphora, half buried in moss. It hums softly, like it remembers songs long since fallen out of fashion. "This," Dionysus says, "is where the story was first poured out." You peer closer. The amphora is covered in tiny carvings, dolphins chasing ships, pirates mid-shift, Dionysus reclining in every pose imaginable. It's been filled with everything over the years: wine, seawater, regrets, lullabies. All of it turns into story eventually. You trace one of the figures with your finger. "Is this me?" The carving does look familiar. Someone walking with a god through a vine-covered dream. "Could be," Dionysus says. "Or it could be anyone who's ever listened." You exhale slowly. Okay, so pirates become dolphins. Not out of spite, but poetry, a lesson, a second act. That's the heart of it, Dionysus says. Myth as permission to change. You both stand in silence, surrounded by the hum of the amphora and the distant giggle of leaves rustling like laughter. You don't need more answers, just the rhythm of the tale and the comfort that it's still being told.
The path loops once more beneath your feet, soft and inviting, like a freshly turned bed. The amphora's hum fades behind you, replaced by something even quieter. Just the rhythmic breath of the forest and the almost imperceptible rustle of vines drawing themselves inward for the night. You glance at Dionysus, expecting him to lead again, but this time he simply gestures ahead. "You know the way now," he murmurs, and somehow you do. You walk, not toward answers, not toward endings, just forward, the way stories walk when they're tired of being questioned. The forest thins slowly, giving way to a moonlit rise of smooth stones, like a giant staircase gently collapsing into the sea. There's a faint glow ahead, warm, flickering. You reach the top of the hill and find yourself at the edge of a cliff, looking down on the quiet bay below. There, far below, dolphins leap. Their shapes arc like commas in a sentence too dreamy to end. You watch them play in gentle spirals, nudge one another, dart through glimmering patches of moonlight. It's almost choreographed, like they're dancing to a rhythm too slow and ancient for human ears. And maybe they are. Dionysus settles beside you, sitting cross-legged on a flat rock. He says, "Most of them forget who they were, but not all. Some remember a little, a sail, a song, a sudden plunge into cool water." You both sit in silence. The dolphins keep circling. You feel a tug in your chest. Not sorrow, not joy, just a recognition. That strange, sleepy understanding that some things are real only because we believe them long enough for them to settle into the folds of the world. Dionysus takes a wineskin from his belt and takes a small sip. He offers it to you. You shake your head, smiling. "I think I'm drunk enough on myth," he laughs. "Fair enough." Above, the stars blink in and out. The night is vast and still, and you feel yourself shrinking into the rhythm of it, one heartbeat at a time, one breath after the next. You know, Dionysus says, almost as an afterthought, there's a theory that the myth was never about punishment, that the pirates weren't even pirates. Maybe they were just people, restless, greedy for adventure, tired of their old lives. Historians still argue over that, you say, mostly to see if he'll laugh. He does. They argue over everything. That's how you keep a myth alive. Confuse everyone just enough that they never agree on what it meant. Do you want to stay confusing? I want to stay necessary. You consider that, then nod. The breeze picks up, and with it comes the scent of salt and honey. Somewhere far off, a lyre plucks itself, soft notes carried on the wind. The cliff fades behind you, and you realize it's time to return, wherever return is now. You look down at your hands. They're the same, but also different, like you've held something important and let it go. Dionysus is watching you, not with expectation, just a calm, sleepy sort of approval, the way someone might look at a freshly told joke that landed well. Thank you, you say. He grins. Don't mention it. Seriously, it'll ruin my reputation. You smile and begin to walk again. The path reappears, gentle and sloping, carrying you through one last curtain of vines and shadow. The sounds of the dolphins dim behind you, replaced by your own quiet footsteps and the steady anchoring hush of the sea. The story is over now, but the echo remains. And just before you vanish entirely from the dream, you hear one last sound, soft, lilting, unmistakable, laughter and the splash of a dolphin tail. Now the story rests. You lie still, nestled in a space that no longer needs explanation. The rhythm of myth has slowed to the hush of your own breath. Each inhale folds the world a little smaller. Each exhale lets it go. The forest, the cliff, the sea, all of it recedes gently into the backdrop of sleep. You don't need to carry it, just let it sit, like a favorite book closed softly in your lap. The air is cool now, but not cold, the kind of temperature that asks nothing of you except to be still. Let your fingers relax. Let your thoughts dissolve like wine in warm water. There's no lesson you need to remember, no moral to rehearse. Just the feeling of drifting alongside dolphins who were once men, and a God who knew how to laugh without cruelty. You are safe here, not because the story said so, but because you said yes to the story. And now it's time to say yes to sleep. No need to rush. The night is patient. It knows how long these stories take. Let your thoughts quiet themselves. Let the stars grow dim. Let the dolphins swim onward without you. And as the final curtain draws itself across the dream, you are free to rest at last in peace.